So we're going to today look at these codes that we've got here. So before I read this at the top, I'm just going to remind you that you've been sent home all of these screenshots. So if you can't see it or it's easier for you, print it out or have it next door to you so you can look at the same time as I'm doing it. And then also you'll have questions that are really similar to the ones that we're going through now as well. So my top tip for today is the same thing as we've done with all these non-verbal reasoning lessons, is I want you to think about what is the same and what you notice about the figures that is the same, that's in common, okay? That's my top tip for you. So, I'll start by reading this here. This is kind of our practice example one together. To answer these questions, you have to work out a code. In the boxes on the left are shapes and the code letters that go with them. The top letters mean something different to the bottom ones. You must decide how the letters go with the shapes. Then find the correct code for the test shape, this one here, from the set of 5 codes on the right and mark its letter on your answer sheet. The examples below have been done for you and the answers marked on the answer sheet. So I think when you first look at these, they can look a little bit scary and overwhelming. So for the time being, I just want you to ignore all this. We're going to focus on this here, okay? Now, the first thing you do is you think, okay, what's the same? What can I see that's the same? And I suggest the first thing that you look at is you look at the shapes that you can see, okay? Now, what do we see that's the same? I notice that we've got a circle, a square, a square. So I've got 2 squares that are the same, okay? Now, if I have a look at the letters, I'm looking at the connection. I see, oh, okay, I've got X, Y, Y. So that tells me that a square is shown by a Y, okay? So I'm actually going to make that, I'm going to write that up here, a little code for ourselves. So a Y is represented by a square. Now that means that actually this X is going to be represented, okay, by a circle shape. So again, I'm going to write that up for myself. So I've got a circle that's represented by an X. Now there is also something else I noticed that's the same about these shapes. I noticed the bottom here, I've got an S and an S, and both of these shapes are blank. Okay, so that tells me that S means that any shape that you have will be a blank shape, and that means that T is going to be represented by this kind of lined effect here. So now I know that, I can move over here. I think, right, okay, what do I see? I see a circle. I know that a circle is represented by an X, so I'm going to put an X here. Then I think, okay, the circle is not a blank circle, so therefore it's not going to be represented by an S. Instead, it's going to be represented by a T for this lined effect here. So I'm going to put a T down here. So I'm taking the knowledge I've got from these shapes and I'm applying it here. So if I look XT, I can see that is B. There's my answer. Let's look at our explanation. In the example above, both squares have a Y at the top, but the circle has an X. So the top code must be for the shape. Now that's important, that point, because obviously it could be that the top code is actually showing the colour. Okay, so you have to work out those aspects of it as well. Both white shapes have an S at the bottom, but the shaded shape has a T. So the bottom code must be for shading. The test shape has a shaded circle, so its code letters must be X for circle and T for shading. And B has been marked on the answer sheet. Now look at the second example. So we're going to do that. I remember at any point you can pause and go back if it doesn't make sense. There will be opportunities for you to have a go by yourself, but we'll go through all of these. Okay, so let's look at example 2. So let's first of all look at the shapes we've got in the middle. So we've got a circle, a triangle, a circle. We've got no dots, 1 dot, 2 dots. Okay, so let's look at, we've got, that is the same. Well, I actually don't see anything the same here. We've got, except for these 2 circles. So what I'm going to do then just show that I can match those up. So again, it must be these top letters are representing the shape. So I'm going to write that up again, like a little code for myself. M is represented by a circle, and therefore you probably realise that N is represented by a triangle. So now I look at the other thing that's to do with the shape. So I've got G means no dots. I'm going to do a little line, no dots. H, 1 dot. I, 2 dots. Okay? So the bottom letters represent how many dots are in the shape. So now let's look at our test shape here. So we're looking for a triangle. Okay? We know that N is represented by a triangle, so I'm going to put N up there. So notice I'm keeping the N in the top row because the top row represents the shape. The bottom row represents there's no dots in the shape at all. Now the only one that's got no dots was this one here, and that was represented by G, so I'm going to put a G here. So actually, first answer, A, will be our correct answer. Let's have a little look at the explanation. So it says, both circles have an M at the top, but the triangle has an N, so the top code must be for shape. The bottom code letter is different for each shape, so G, H and I must be the codes for no dot, 1 dot and 2 dots. The test shape is a triangle with no dots, so its code letters must be N for triangle and G for no dots, and A has been marked as the answer. Now do the practice question below. Remember there is a new code for each question. Okay, something in bold there, a new code for each question. So, let's have a look at this one. Now, if you want to at this point, you can pause the video, have a go by yourself, seeing what's in common, what can you notice about these 4 shapes here. Okay, if you wanted to stay with me, you can. So, we're going to go back to that question I've been repeating. What do we see that is the same? So, what do I see that's the same? I always kind of start with the shape because I think that's quite an obvious, clear thing to see. So I see that we've got 2 hexagons and we've got 2 parallelograms. Now I notice that with the shapes where they're hexagons, we've got R and R. So I'm going to make the sensible assumption that R is linked to a hexagon. Again, let me just write that up there so it's really clear for you. Excuse my rather bad hexagon. You get what I mean, hexagon. Then S, I'm going to assume, is linked to a parallelogram. Okay? So we've got my parallelogram there. Okay, so now I'm going to look at my bottom letters, and I've got F, G, F, G. So again, what can I notice that's, I've got F, G, F, H. So again, I look, what do I notice that is the same? And I notice on my first and my third shape, again, I've got this line, this dashed effect, and on both of those shapes, I've got the letter F. So I'm going to do a little line in there to demonstrate that for you. This shape here is a white middle. This one here is a black middle. So I'm going to say that H represents a shaded inside, a black inside, and white represents an empty inside. Okay, because I've got all my code sorted now. So now I can look at my code over here. So I'm going to start off. We know that the top row is represented by a shape, and we've got a hexagon here. I can look up here and I've got an R for my hexagon. I've got a missing one down here, and I need to look at a shape that is blank, okay? The only one that's blank is this one here, and we know that's represented by a G. So my code is RG. I look along, I can see I've got RG there. So both 6-sided shapes have got an R at the top, and both 4-sided shapes have an S. So the top code must be for the shape. The bottom codes show that both shapes of diagonal lines have an F. The unshaded shape has a G, and the shaded shape has an H, so the bottom codes must be for the shading. The test shape is 6 sides and unshaded, so its code letters must be R for shape and G for shading, so E is the correct answer. Now, with these ones, what I'd like you to do is pause the video. I will move away slightly so you can just pause it and see it clearly. And I'd like you to have a go by yourself, okay? And then we will come back and we'll go through the answers. So I'm going to pause. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go. So we're going to start off by looking at number 61. So hopefully you thought, okay, what have we got that is the same? Now when I did this one, actually I found this one the most difficult one for me personally. Everyone's different, you might not. But I thought, right, what have we got the same? So I first of all thought, right, let's look at the shapes that I've got. And I have got these two circles, I noticed were the same size circle, and this one was a slightly bigger circle. And then I looked at the squares, and all of the squares are different sizes. I've got what I'd call a large, actually those two are the same size. Those two are the same size. Got a small one here. So I thought, well, I'm going to focus on the circles first. So what is the same, okay, here, and what's the same as I've got two L's. Okay, so I thought, okay, right, so an L is being represented by a small circle. Then I think, okay, what else can I see in common, or what else is different? So if I'm looking, and the L is on the top, so I'm going to focus on this slightly larger circle, and that must be represented by the M. Make my circle a bit bigger for you. Okay, so then it's a focus of having to look at the bottom letters. Now I notice the bottom letters, X, Y, Z, are all different, which means there's something different represented in each code. So what I have noticed is, with X, the shapes are separate. The circle and the square are separate. With Y, they have crossed over. Okay, you can see they're half and half and half crossed over. And with Z, one is sitting inside the other shape. The circle is inside the square. So knowing that, I'm going to have a little look at this shape here. Now straight away, I see this, okay, is exactly the same as this. I know this code is represented, this kind of half and half, is represented by a Y. So I'm going to put a Y down at the bottom here. Then it's left for me to look at the size of the circle and to consider that. And this is a small circle that I've got here, and I know that my small circle is represented by an L. So I have got my LX as my answer. Okay? Now, let's have a look at number 62. So with 62, we've got it's a pentagon, it's an irregular pentagon, five-sided shape. And we've got the same shape, okay, on each kind of code. We've got it pointing up, pointing down, and then we've got a white, black, white, black. So, first of all, I think, what's the same? And what's not the same with these shapes is I've got a upward pointing pentagon, and so therefore these two are both pointing up, and I've got two Ds. So they're going to be represented, okay, that shape, that pointy up pentagon is going to be represented by a D. Okay? A downwards facing pentagon, therefore, must be represented by an E. And then I have to have a little look about the kind of shades and the filling in of these shapes. And I noticed already that I've got two M's here. So obviously M is representing a half black, half white shape, and L is representing a completely empty blank shape. So now that means I can have a look over here and consider what I've got. So first of all, I've got that blank, empty shape. So I can go back to my shape here and think, okay, I know that's going to be represented by an L. And then I can think, okay, this is a pentagon that is facing downwards, which is the same as this one here. That means that's going to be represented by an E. So my answer is going to be E-L here. This one down here, let's move this out of the way so you can see. Okay, so here we have got three triangles, in a column. Then we've got 3, again, pentagons coming across in a row, and then rectangles going down. So I think, okay, well, I've got the letters C, D, C at the top, so I'm thinking, right, so C and C, there must be something the same, and I notice that we've got 2 vertical lines, basically lines that go straight, straight. So I think shapes in a vertical line must be represented by a C. So I'll do a vertical line there. And that means shapes going across in a horizontal line must be represented by D. So then I think, okay, what else can I have a little look at? Well, actually, on the bottom, I've got P, Q, R. So there actually aren't anything, there isn't anything the same between these codes then. But what that tells me is that P must represent triangles, Q must represent the pentagons, and R must represent rectangles. So then that kind of helps me. So I think, oh, okay, well here I've got my pentagons. I know the pentagons are represented by Q on the bottom. So I'm going to put a Q there, okay? And then I think, right, okay, so what's the line? Is it a horizontal line or a vertical line? It's a vertical line. I know that a vertical line is represented by C. So my answer is going to be CQ. Just like that. Only 2 more, and then you are done. Right, so again, you can pause, have a go, then we'll go through the answers. So I'm going to step back. Okay, hopefully you've had a go. So, we're back down to 3 codes here. So let's have a look at what is the same. So we've got all of them the circles, aren't they, to start off with. So we've got 2 black circles, 1 white circle, 3 black circles. So we now have to look about, okay, what can we see that's the same between these shapes? So I've got 2 C's. So I think probably with the C's here, the only thing that I can see that is the same is the size of the circle. Because D here, we've got these slightly smaller circles. So I think C is going to be representing a slightly bigger circle, and D is going to be representing a slightly smaller circle. Then I look at my codes on the bottom. I've got R, S, T. Now, R, we could say, okay, that's 2 circles. S is 1 circle, and T is 3 circles. So if I have a little look now at this shape that I've got here, okay, I've got a small circle, so I think, okay, that's going to be represented by a D, a small circle. And then I've only got 1 circle, okay, now that's going to be represented by an S. So my answer is going to be DS. Now this one is a little bit more difficult, and I'll tell you why. Because with this one, they've given you, some of the shapes are shaded in black, and some of them are shaded in white. And that actually is a layer of the code that you don't need. So as you get more advanced with this, you might start thinking, oh, but last time on the other shape, the colour was important, and this time it's not. So sometimes you have to delve a little bit deeper and just be aware that sometimes it changes the colour of the shape just to throw you off a little bit. Okay, last one, you're doing really well. So with this one, let's go back to the beginning, think about our question, what do we see that is the same, okay? Now with this one, I wanted to put your attention to the letters. We've got Q, R, S, T. None of those letters are the same, okay? However, on the bottom, H, I, H, J. So I'm actually going to focus my attention for the first time in this lesson to what's happening on the bottom, first of all, because I want to look at the H's, and I want to look at this code, and I want to look at this code, and think, what's the same? There's got to be something the same, because they've both got an H on the bottom. What do we notice? I notice, in both of these, we've got a triangle. So that tells me the bottom code is representing the shape in the middle, which means that I is representing, again, my regular pentagon, and J is representing this kind of curved shape here. Okay? Now, if I go my attention to the top layer, that means this shield, circle, curved and pentagon are all represented by different letters. So I could literally match those up. That goes with that, that goes with that, that goes with that. That makes it super easy for me to answer because now I look here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the top code first, the outside shape. So the outside shape, I've got this kind of shield looking shape, which we know is represented by Q. There's Q. And on the inside, I'm looking for the bottom code down here. I've got, again, like an upside down shield shape, and there's only one of those on these codes here, and that therefore is represented by J. So that means my answer is going to be this one.